So I want to be really clear. I'm not anti-porn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, me either.
The city of Los Angeles is on lockdown.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Lockdown Podcast. Today we are joined by the one and only Dr. Kate Balestrieri.
Yes.
How are you doing? Did I get the name right?
You did.
All right, because I was real nervous. I don't want to say I was practicing multiple times.
Nicely done, I might say.
Whew,
Yeah.
good. Because we spoke in Spanish on this podcast, and believe it or not, I'm not a great fluent Spanish speaker, and I put more practice into getting your last name right on this one than I did for the Spanish episode.
Gracias.
Multifaceted.
So, first off, for the audience out there, we do take COVID very seriously, and all of us were tested multiple times for the antibody test and the antigen test before this. So please don't leave mean comments.
Yeah.
But without further ado, could you please explain to the audience, what is it exactly that you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great segue. So I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist. I practices here in LA, Miami, and Chicago, and I'm a certified sex therapist, a sex addiction therapist, and I'm trained in what's called the PACT model of couples therapy, which is shorthand for the psychobiological approach for couples therapy. So I do a lot. I work with individuals, couples, and really help them identify and heal from any trauma, if trauma exists. And if it does or doesn't, whatever their goals are, I help them improve their relationships and their sex lives. So that's my Monday through Friday.
The craziest part about all that is with all of that history and experience, I still don't think you can fix Tim. We got some major issues.
Basically, and the audience knows this, I've just been booking guests that I secretly just want to get like a free session out of and things like that. So really, this podcast is just
started with the dominatrix.
Even though you're the guest, it's gonna be all about me.
Okay.
But no, in all seriousness,
So
So how did you know that you always wanted to go in that field?
No, this is a second career for me. So,
Really?
Yeah. I used to work in the world of insurance. I was a
Fun.
broker. I know. Actually, it was such a great career. I made a lot of money, and it was rewarding in many ways. But I just over time felt like I needed to do something that had a little bit more soul to it. So I've always been a true crime junkie and have loved to understand what makes people tick. So I decided to go back and pursue psychology. And I spent the first, I would say, 10 years of my career working in different prison settings and working with the courts, doing evaluations and treatment for sex offenders and non-sexual high-risk offenders. And then I did some work with the courts in helping parents who had had their children removed from their custody find reunification opportunities if there were some. And then I transitioned to private practice, and I focus on helping people heal from addiction and trauma, and took a lot of the same skills and trainings that I had from working with incarcerated people to non-incarcerated people, because all of us walking wounded out here who are not in prison still need a lot of attention and help and love too. So
No, absolutely. So God, that's gonna be such a, I'm gonna go from insurance, like, oh, maybe I'll go to psychology, and the next thing you know, you're in like the criminal system. I mean, that's gotta be, you didn't just like dip your toes in, you just head first into it.
I dove right in.
Yeah, that seems to me like it wouldn't be a kickoff spot. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it seems to me like that'd be like, you'd have to be in the game for a while to get to.
You took your gen eds in college first
yeah,
before
right?
you go straight to.
You went straight to that's a tough spot, I feel like. What was that like? What was that like? Can you shed some light on? Did you do that for years? Was that a short stint?
All of the above, yes.
Okay.
So I worked in, maybe 4 or 5 different prisons total.
Wow.
With adolescent and adult men and women. So it was, honestly, it was great. I got to see the most benevolent and most malevolent of what the human species has to offer. So
you saw the whole spectrum.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And it was incredible. I mean, there are some really lovely wounded people who loved getting therapy and really benefited from it. And then from, just an examination perspective, it was great training because everything that happens in a prison is a microcosm of what's going on out in the world in terms of medical issues, mental health issues, systemic issues. And it was great to be able to learn so much in such a short amount of time, and then be able to take a lot of that and kind of, make some leaps and bounds with non-incarcerated people, to really kind of help them speed up their progress.
Sure.
Because they didn't live in the same overly rigid or contained system of a prison. So there were more treatment options and opportunities.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, so it was awesome.
So when you just started to get into it, did you just kind of start going to like whatever area fascinated you? Because obviously we went from prisons. Like, did you know you always wanted to end up working, let's say, with couples and things like that, or did you?
Was that like a long-term goal, or?
No.
Really?
No, I really thought I would be sort of the next Clarice at some point, and that was going to be...
Well, yeah, the true crime junkie part of it.
This is all CSI Miami's fault and Silence of the Lambs.
Yes, yes. No, I really thought that would be where I would stay, but the underside of working in the prison systems is that you have to work in the prison systems, and so... For me, it was very challenging after a while to be in a system that was so under-resourced and so overtaxed and overburdened. And so I found myself really wanting to be able to do more for people. And I decided to step away from that world and start working in private practice. But if you had asked me 10 years ago if I'd be living in LA
as a sex
therapist doing this, I would have thought you were crazy.
So how long have you been in LA then?
What year is it? 2021? About 7 years.
7 years.
Okay.
Okay. And have you been working with couples for about 7 years too, or would you say a little bit more?
Yeah. On and off, individuals and couples for, since I started in this field, so 2010.
All right. So I guess the biggest question, now that we're getting into it, is what is the biggest thing that couples come to you about? Like the biggest issue?
Is there a most common, like, day in and day out, you always see this problem come up? Or is it everyone is their own kind of tailored beast?
It's both.
Okay.
So do you want to know what people identify as their problem or what's really going on?
Oh, wow.
Good question. Identify as.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those questions come in a handful of different forms because of the areas that I specialize in. So usually it presents as, they have mismatched libidos. One person wants to be more sexual than the other person does. Or there's been infidelity and some kind of
it is LA.
Yeah, well, yes, it is LA. So we're working on helping them heal from that trauma and that betrayal. Or somebody has had, one or both of them have had a lot of trauma in their earlier lives, and that's led to things like wonky communication between the two of them, or not feeling safe and feeling unseen, and so things like that. So I would say those are probably the majority of the issues that people come in wanting help for. And then certainly there are some more significant things like active addiction or domestic violence and abuse, or things like pretty severe acute mental health issue. So it's a whole gamut.
Well, so I guess taking it from the worst side of the spectrum, let's say the abuse part, has there been instances where you've had to work with couples and you're just like, this is, like, you could just tell right away or through their first session, like, this is not healthy, or like, this is almost dangerous?
At what point do you try to fix something or just let it go, kind of a deal?
Or refer to the authorities.
So. Has there been points where you're just like, this isn't something that we should be putting time into to try to heal or fix, and this is more like, needs to just not happen type deal?
Awesome question. So a couple of things. Therapists are required to keep everything confidential.
Right, of course.
Right? Yeah. Except if somebody is an imminent threat to themselves or someone else.
Okay.
Or if they are talking about any kind of abuse or neglect to someone under 18 or over 65. Some states have laws about reporting being a mandated thing if there are sexually explicit images like child pornography that are brought up. Some states do require that disclosure. So outside of that, I don't report to the authorities,
of course, sure,
right, if there's violence in a relationship. But with couples, if there's active domestic violence, it's usually not indicated to do couples therapy because
good point,
it's hard to
referee.
Yeah, and also sometimes when when somebody is really acute in their perpetration, they might use what happens in therapy against the partner when they leave. And so, you know, we say stop and draw the line in the sand if therapy is hurting more than it's helping.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of like diminishing returns idea. Like once the gains are done, it's like, okay, we're only messing things up here.
Totally.
The guy that goes home and she was on your side
Yeah.
the whole time. Like, I
it's
feel like that's
very
gotta
real.
be like,
Yeah,
you get with that a lot. Like,
unfortunately, yeah.
yeah.
So-
I mean, I could imagine it could get pretty combative. Like, I've never been in, I'm still a pretty young guy. I haven't been in a crazy toxic type relationship or anything like that before. But I could imagine you want to defend your point of view.
Yeah.
You know,
She
and
won't do the dishes. You know, like I get that. But no, in all seriousness, so generally, obviously, it's tailored to every single person individually.
Right.
But would you say a lot of it revolves around communication?
Totally.
And would you say communication and sex, like, are those? I feel like those also go hand in hand in some aspects too,
Hopefully.
right? Oh, yeah. Right.
could you imagine if they didn't?
Yeah, that's very true. So obviously,
We might have to be calling the
And so
authorities.
they identify the certain issues, but generally, what is really the underbelly of like what's going on in a lot of these relationships?
So glad you asked. Really at the core of it, and the way that I've been trained to work with couples and individuals is to really think about what allows someone to feel safe and what evokes a need for self-protection. And so when we can learn about those kinds of cues, whether we're talking about you as an individual or you guys as friends or in your romantic relationships, whatever that might look like, we're always looking for safety, because safety allows for connection and effective communication. And when people don't feel safe, they can't connect, so they just sort of silo. And even if they're next to each other, they're siloed in their own world and their own self-protective experience, and that really gets in the way of them having hot communicative sex or good communication or parenting effectively, right? So we really are looking at what gets in the way of them both feeling okay.
Them both feeling safe. What does that remind you of? The dominatrix.
Oh God.
So her first thing that she said was the most important element of her job was that her clientele felt safe and comfortable, like no one was going to mess with them or hurt them or, punch him while his hands are tied. They're in vulnerable positions. And it's so funny that the first thing you said was like both sides have to feel safe. And the first thing she said was that that guy or the girl, whoever she's dominating, has to be on board and feel safe with it for them to even enjoy it at all.
Totally.
So that's such an interesting tie that, like, even in like such a crazy state, like a dominatrix kink type thing, it still always boils down to the same core needs.
I mean, that's really the whole point of dominatrix situations, doming and subbing, is the ability to play with power and boundaries in a way that is curated and safe so that people can let their hair down. I know what the safe word is, and I know that I can play and I can be totally carefree and spontaneous, and I'm going to be protected if I say that word. Right? So when we take those basic principles and apply them to couples who are not into BDSM, then it allows for like all kinds of hotness and transparency and deeper connection. Are you okay?
Yeah, no, I get anxious when we're talking about things that, like, I have problems with. So I know you're looking at me and I'm like bugging out over here.
I know this is like a pseudo session for you, so
and this is exactly. So
fill us in, Tim. What can we help you with today on the Lockdown podcast?
I miss her a lot.
Oh God.
So also on top of working with couples, you also see individuals too. And does it present different challenges as far as like from individuals to couples? Because obviously with couples, you're dealing with multiple people, but then with an individual, you're dealing with one person that might be having questions about the whole world. So what's the biggest difference there between relationships and maybe what do most individuals want to seek out your help for?
My help specifically or therapy?
Or both, sure.
Okay. Well, so, again, I typically specialize in helping people heal from trauma or addiction, and then, of course, improve their relationships and address any kind of area in their life where mental health and sexuality intersect.
Sure.
So people might see me for different reasons than they might see another therapist. But, individuals come to me because, for myriad reasons. Sometimes they're struggling with compulsive or problematic sex, and they want to get a handle on it so that porn isn't ruining their relationships or their ability to be sexual with partners in real life. Sometimes they come to me because they, had some kind of an abusive relationship, either with a parent or a sibling or a previous partner, and they're recognizing that they're kind of picking the same person over and over again as they're dating people in the real world, and so they want to break that.
Yeah, they want to break that cycle.
Yep.
What have you seen, just as kind of like a segue real quick, we'll come back to that, but I've always just been curious. You've been in this sphere, you said, for 10 years?
I graduated in 2010, but I started working clinically in 2006.
So what would you see, have you noticed any like crazy big change with how media is consumed in 2006 versus 2021 and like the effects on sexuality?
Yes, totally.
Really?
Yeah, with the increase of digital technology, the apps, and the way that we now communicate in such a digital way, the buffer of that has been amazing in some ways, but really detrimental to our ability to humanize each other and to really be connected in real life in a way that feels sustainable. Because sometimes we live such a digital experience that being around somebody is really overwhelming from a sensory perspective.
Yeah.
Now
that plus
the
COVID lockdown,
Yeah.
Not
it's
a good
like
recipe.
you haven't physically interfaced with someone in it could be a year, something like that. Like, yeah, that's got to be a weird kind of a combination.
So overall, when it comes to the dating apps, I'm so curious about this. Would you say that it's an overall net positive or negative that they bring to the table?
I don't know that I can say that globally, because I think it really depends on each person's relationship to the apps, how they use them. I met my partner on an app 15 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Right, or on a website.
I was gonna say not
Not an app.
that was Match.com. Is what that was? Yeah.
What was it? Oh, nice. Aw. Sponsored by.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Call them up.
Yeah.
No, so we met on a website many years ago, and the way that people used dating websites then was really different.
Totally,
than how we use
they
the
put
apps
time into
today.
it. They were invested in it. It was like you had to pay for it.
And now it's just.
And now it's.
Well, and they also took the interactions more seriously.
Yeah, there were fewer.
Every person that you matched with, you were like, "Oh, hi, human.
Yeah.
What's new about you?
Totally.
How can we connect?" And now so many people are using the apps to just sort of pass time when they're bored or to get validation. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong.
I was about to say I feel attacked right now.
No, it's not right or wrong. But what happens is that I think some people use the apps like that sometimes, and then they change their motivation with the apps later. And everybody's in their own rhythm, right? And their own dance. And so where I think technology is hurting us collectively is that we can't always be sure someone else is using the apps in the same way we are. And so that's when there are different expectations and hurt feelings.
Totally.
And that's where also it's just so much harder to communicate exactly what your intentions are.
Yes.
And even if you have the ability, some people are...
You might not know.
Yeah, you might not know, which is also fair. But also some people do know what they want, but then are just like jerks and, will communicate something different. But... So that's the explosion with the apps, which has been insane. But also with that, as things have become more digital, obviously, I feel like with every new industry, all of a sudden, like porn is sex always sells and it's just always there. And with every new thing, it's there. And porn has been no exception as things have become, instead of like pornography on the computer, now it's on your phone. And how big do you think sex addiction, and we're not necessarily, I'll start with porn addiction. Do you think porn addiction has like grown as this has happened, or do you think this is something that's always been kind of constant? Or
awesome questions. Humans are visual creatures, right? So there's been documented porn since basically the dawn of humans.
Sure, yeah.
Right?
really,
Yeah.
like the hieroglyphics that are just like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, definitely.
Totally. And sculptures and everything. The medium was different.
Yeah.
And
I mean, even like ancient Amazon, like they like that's like the OG of the huge the guy. Yes, exactly. The little men with the little statues, and they have huge freaking dicks, or like the women have huge breasts and big asses. Like that shit goes back thousands of years.
True story.
Yeah.
It does. So I think what I've been seeing clinically in the last 10 years since porn has become accessible in such a quick medium, meaning with the apps and with the internet specifically. Because 15 years ago, I think the fastest way to consume pornography was typically on a pay-per-click channel.
Sure.
But even then, you had to wait for them to change the content, right? Now with apps and the internet, you could just click, 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 click,
all day.
click. Yeah, and you're seeing sound bites and from an audio perspective and also a visual perspective. So your brain is taking in and processing information so much more quickly than it did before. And I think I know, we're seeing research that is showing the younger generations who are growing up with porn as sort of their primary source of sexual education in a digital way. Their brains are actually developing differently than people who grew up before internet porn was really as prevalent as it is now. So I'm seeing a lot of young men, 18 to 35 and 40, where there's not generally as high a prevalence of erectile dysfunction coming in with erectile dysfunction issues. Sometimes it's specific to a partner in real life, and sometimes the overstimulation of porn, both visually, what they're seeing on the screen, and then of course physically, the way they're stimulating themselves, it desensitizes them.
Totally.
Yeah, and that's not unique to men, but certainly more men are coming in.
No, and that, to me, that just sounds scary.
I know, like, I'm glad you brought it up too, because I wanted to ask you if you saw a lot of like 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, because it was just so different, so not that long ago.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, I'm 28, Tim's 29, and our generation of, when you're young and curious and you're like 12, 13, you're like hornier than anyone in the world. And it would be it would be a joke to try to look it up online back then. So it was still like a lot of like Playboys or whatever, like super slow, spoon-fed movies. There'd be but like fuzzy, like Channel 99, you caught like half a tit, and you were like,
the internet,
holy crap.
The internet, when it like download,
it was a joke. You'd get caught by your parents by the time the page was freaking downloaded. So we got it at that clip still, and I think we're literally the last generation that did, because that's right when the advent of the iPhone, and I think the iPhone and watching porn on that really fucked everybody up. Because it's just in your pocket. Like, you went from a spot where you had to plan that shit out. You had to be like, parents are asleep, like there's a whole dance to it just to do like some naughty stuff. Right. But now, like, kids could go to the bathroom in their house, or not in their house, or in school or anywhere, and you have a freaking HD
everywhere.
Apple iPhone 12 in your pocket that's like,
and like you said,
2 seconds.
It just it has to. Like when you have an actual human being like outside the bathroom, and then all of a sudden like you're just being exposed to, I mean, it's the internet,
whatever you might click on.
Everything.
Yeah.
So.
And then you get a girlfriend when you're 16, and you're like, what are you supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
Like.
So I want to be really clear. I'm not anti-porn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No,
me either. Yeah, we're pro-porn too. It's just so different now.
It is. Like, I'm not. When I say I'm not anti-porn, I'm not anti-visual erotica.
Sure.
Right? Like, we are visual creatures, and I think there is a place for ethical production and consumption.
Of course.
If we're paying attention to what we're taking in. I don't mean that literally, although of course it could be.
Nice.
If we're paying attention to what we're putting in our bodies, right, and what we're taking in our minds, the hope is higher quality ingredients, right? If we want sustainable farm-fed beef in our burgers, right? We want ethically produced visual erotica. So I'm seeing a few things with sort of mainstream porn that are not great. And I don't know if you both saw recently, the New York Times did a bunch of articles about Pornhub and sort of the questionable ethics of what was on their platform.
You saw the credit cards just pull, to make them end up taking like a third of the website off in a night.
Yeah. So to your question, there's a lot of implications of having porn so readily available, and especially the way it has been created and then distributed, right? So we have sort of the social attitudes about it that shape the way people think about sex. And as a form of sex education, porn sucks. Because it really is not realistic, and it's not meant to be.
It's a movie. It's supposed to be over the top.
Yeah, it's meant to be a fantasy. It's meant to be fun. It's not supposed to have all the quirks and the messiness.
Yeah.
Right? So, unfortunately, when the younger generations are now coming in and they're seeing this, they don't know that that's not reality. It's literally their only template for what sex looks like. So they're going into their sexual experiences, and that's what they think is supposed to happen. So when it doesn't, and it looks, feels, smells, tastes, sounds differently than what they see on screen, it can be really uncomfortable, undesirable, and disappointing and shame-filled for them, because they don't know if they're doing something wrong, if their partner's doing something wrong, or if what they saw on the screen was wrong.
Sure, yeah.
It could be really discombobulating.
That's a good point. It's got to be so disappointing now. Like, you know what? Remember how exciting it was to like make out in like your first blow job, or like first time you got laid? It was like, dude, you were on cloud nine for forever. And now it's probably just like, nah, she was all right.
Yeah,
like,
there's only one girl here or something.
yeah,
It's just
exactly.
Like,
Like, it's not a threesome. Like,
exactly what you said. So honestly, okay, so I kind of have a question from personal experience, but I'm just wondering if I'm not alone in this, because just as we're talking about and again, is the ethical porn and everything like that, we are totally for it, like 100%. So my question is, and I think, so let's just, I'm not going to go into details, but let's say if I started watching like pornography of like a girl and she's blonde hair, and then I was like, oh, I like that. And then all of a sudden, but she, now I'm watching a blonde girl and she has bigger breasts. And then now I'm watching a blonde girl, she has bigger breasts, and now she has a nice butt. And then now we keep going down to where it's like, okay, now just a regular blonde isn't enough for me. Right. Unless like she has to be a blonde that has like a tattoo on the side that says daddy, and like, like I'm just saying, I feel like I can see that in my own self, where you start going for the same thing, but you like not go further in a bad way, but it just becomes like more of,
you're building the perfect,
exactly,
the ideal.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm just noticing that from the outside. Like, to me, it just, that doesn't seem like necessarily healthy, because it's like,
it can't be,
yeah,
because that doesn't exist. It's the same thing with fucking Instagram, where it's like everyone shows that they have cars and houses and they're rich and every day is the best day ever. Dude, if you're 13 and you're looking at that and you just got an F in math class, like, you probably feel like a fucking loser. Like,
well, okay.
that's
so,
rough.
But is that necessarily like something that you see sometimes?
I see it a lot, yeah. And what you're describing is, potentially limited to the way people's arousal templates are shaped, right? So when you learn that you like something, of course you seek that out.
Sure.
Right.
You seek out specific characteristics or movements or positions or sounds or smells, right? We go to what we like. The only trouble with that is that if we are so specific in what we seek out, then what happens is our brain gets bored with that.
Yeah.
And so then
You're always bummed out.
Well, herein lies the next dilemma that you mentioned, which is tolerance, right? So our brain's like, all right, already saw that. What's the next level of intensity I can do to amplify that?
Right.
And so then what happens is we seek that out, and because porn literally has everything you could ever want or never want to see, then what happens is you go out into the real world and people don't look like that, they don't speak like that, they don't engage like that, they're not sexual like that. And so your brain's like, well, no.
Yeah.
Right? And so it can be really challenging to help people rewire their arousal template to a way that is more excited to what is not as intense. But a lot of people see that when they stop watching porn for a period of time, a longer period of time, some of those more organic arousals come back.
Yeah, tolerance break. I do the same thing with weed.
Yeah.
If I smoke too much weed, I don't get high anymore. I'm like, this is lame. Don't smoke weed for 2 weeks. All of a sudden, you're on a freaking moon the next time you do. It's got to be the same thought process.
I'm sorry. Do you see like porn in these couples' relationships? Like, do they ever bring that up as like a potential issue as they're like talking?
Yeah, I mean, look, porn is not always a bad thing.
Of course not.
So I don't want to paint it with that brush. So many couples will come in, and there will be some concerns around porn. You know, one partner might say, gosh, I feel really insecure, or my partner's not attracted to me anymore because what they watch in porn is something I could never look like or act like, right? So of course there are those kinds of difficulties and conflicts that come up. If there's a porn addiction, that's something that really can have a negative impact in a coupleship. But sometimes couples come in and they want to talk about ways that they can change what they're doing sexually. Or one partner wants to introduce something new and the other partner's never tried it. They don't know how to start or what it looks like, what it's about. So porn can be a really great way for them to kind of dip their toe in the waters of what can be possible. When that happens and when it's a positive thing, it's usually followed with a lot of communication, a lot of debriefing, and a commitment to mutual safety around the issue, right? So if my partner starts feeling really uncomfortable and insecure, we stop, and then we reconnect here, right? When porn is a problem, it's because it's usurped the connection in the relationship. So that's something to think about. But porn can also be really great because it can give people an opportunity to get some sexual needs met that maybe their partner's not comfortable with.
Sure.
And if both partners are transparent about that and okay about it, it can be wildly successful in helping them move through any sexual, sticking points, if you will. And then they can make space and room for what they do sexually enjoy together.
Yeah. Well, that brings up like the next level of that conversation is, how would you want to, or how would you advise basically trying to talk to your partner if there's something that you wanted them to try or be open to? I mean, obviously, I feel like a lot of that obviously you have to have that trust there before, because that might be, especially in a relationship, if you're opening up completely to like, say, this has been your fantasy forever, or this is something I'm secretly into, like,
and it doesn't go well.
Yeah, well, I feel like that's just got to be one super hard to even bring up, because it's like, what if it was laughed at, or that's hard, right?
Yeah.
This is something I help couples work through all the time, right? If one partner has a fantasy that they're really scared to talk about, either because they want to try it and don't know that their partner will be receptive, or because they feel a lot of shame around it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's helpful to really think first about what are the biases that you may be holding on to about the fantasy or that sexual behavior or activity that create a sense of discomfort for you and even talking about it, and first kind of work through that, because when you bring it to your partner, now we are looking at all of the biases and fears and hopes and all kinds of narratives that they have about whatever the fantasy or activity is.
Yeah.
And we're making space for them to process that, right? And so when couples can do that in a way that's really committed to non-shaming, non-judgment, even if we decide we're not going to do this together, can we talk about it in a way that, allows us to both feel like the human beings that we are and not, like there's anything wrong with us. So when we first kind of address any reservations about safety, then those conversations can go pretty well.
Yeah. Have you ever had this is kind of on topic and kind of off at the same time, but have you ever, like you mentioned earlier, like one of the bigger problems was different libidos, like one person might be super aroused all the time, the other one maybe not so much, and how that doesn't link up. Have you ever had a case where someone realized that they were attracted to the opposite sex and this whole time and didn't know that they might be, or like come to that realization? Because you see stories all the time about, especially with the actors lately, saying that they come out like 20 years later this whole time.
Really?
That
you just like, I found out my husband's gay. Like,
yeah.
You're just, or
like, have you had that experience? Really?
You've
had like
not in my personal life, but
sorry, with your practice.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yes, I've worked with many couples where
that's so
one
trippy
of them
to me.
is finding out something about themselves or learning to talk about it for the first time, and it can be really, really jarring and upending in their relationship, and it also can bring couples together because it might mean the end of their sexual relationship, but it might not. And it might mean the end of their romantic relationship, but it might not. These two things are not always lumped together, right?
Sure.
So couples might decide to stay together and be sexual in other ways that allow for more fluidity or openness. And so there's just a lot of different creative ways to work through that, where there is a commitment to working through it. And
you also don't know unless you try to work through it. You always just have that hole of never figuring it out. So you might as well and then try to just make a plan from there versus just suppress it all the time.
Absolutely, because when you do that, really you're holding back information about who you are from your partner, and they will feel that. They may not know how to articulate it or what to do about it, but that distance is felt, and some people might decide that's okay for them, but sometimes that in and of itself can be what breaks a couple up.
Yeah, well, because I could just imagine, that's got to be, I feel, it's like, I feel sad, if someone, maybe even they're not like necessarily like say attracted to the same sex or something like that, has lived so let's say like hetero like their entire life,
So
and then all of a
weird.
sudden they find someone maybe that they actually do truly love, and then they think they can like be open to them or maybe try to be open, and then that person, their mind is just blown and it just causes a rift or anything like that, because now you have one person thinking he can or she can thinking that they can trust the other partner, and then now it's like now their relationship is falling apart, and that's the only person they thought they could trust, and it's just like it's sad. I feel
That's a tough spot to be in for sure.
It can be really heartbreaking, and certainly a lot of grieving is necessary to make sense of that, whether that couple stays together or not.
How do you stay so mentally sound? I mean, you've done the prison system, gone to couples therapy, addiction. Like, how are you able to step away from it and stay so level-headed about your own shit?
Well, thank you. That's a nice assumption that I'm staying level-headed about my own shit.
I mean, I think you've been successful in what you've done. You know, you wouldn't have been successful hadn't you been able to navigate that. So, in theory, you must have a good way.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for pointing that out. That therapists are people too, right?
Yeah.
So we all really, as a profession, put a lot of emphasis on taking care of ourselves and doing our own examination, our own exploration, and being in constant consultation and supervision with other providers, so that we can, to the best of our human ability, check our own biases, check when our own stuff is getting activated in the work, and process it in a way that helps it leave the therapeutic space. So there's that from a professional development perspective. I personally am just addicted to learning, so I'm always getting different certifications and doing different trainings and always trying to figure out what I don't know.
Sure.
Right? And that will hopefully be a lifelong
Is there like a
passion.
therapist's therapist?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, like someone that specializes in looking after other therapists, because I would imagine there's got to have been days where you walked away like, holy shit.
Well,
like,
look, most of the good therapists that I know see their own therapist.
Right, okay, that makes
I
sense.
I treat many therapists, and I have a therapist, and all of my colleagues and friends who are psychologists and therapists, we all have our own therapist, because again, we want to stay in constant examination, and there is no shame in learning something about yourself that you didn't know before.
Sure.
Or realizing, oh crap, I got snafu'd in my old stuff again. Okay, here we go. Let me work it through.
Yeah.
Right? And when we as therapists are doing that, we are much better therapists.
Yeah.
Right?
But-
And then on top of that, just self-care. So finding the things in life that bring you joy. So
Sure.
whether it's a relationship, a hobby, a puppy, whatever.
I was gonna say we probably have to go to a good therapist, because if you go to a shitty one, you're just like that's not it. You're asking the wrong question.
That's such a good point. Oh, that'd be a great bit. Just like you just psychoanalyzing each other the whole time.
Don't
like,
you see? Like, I know what the problem is subconsciously, but I want
like-
you to help me.
it's like a Jedi battle.
Yeah.
There's just like force
So,
fields.
A good therapist would say, you've got to let go of your control issues.
there you go.
Yeah.
So obviously, I mean, us just as humans, I mean, everyone has their imperfections and flaws. How much of that do you think is really shaped in your childhood?
All of it.
All of it.
I shouldn't say all of it
Well-
flippantly, but I mean, we become who we are largely because of the way that we interact with other humans in our first couple of years of life. That sets a giant neurobiological imprint on our nervous system. It shapes the way we take in sensory information in the world around us. It's our original set point for what feels safe and what doesn't. And it's our original experience of how other people will attend to us. So we learn a lot about relationships before we even know what a relationship is.
Sure.
And that shapes the way we show up for ourselves and for other people, friends, family, coworkers, and particularly romantic partners as we get older. The good news is that we are malleable humans, so if we don't have a great experience growing up, there is a lot of work that we can do to, change the direction of our relational potential.
How do you feel about I've always been curious, because there's like always two schools of thought as to like the helicopter parent ideology of just like, I need to do anything and everything to prevent this kid from getting hit with a leaf or anything. And then there's the other thought process of like, if I allow them to develop and go through life and take your bumps and bruises and lick your wounds or whatnot, do you have any kind of insight as to like what do you think? I mean, I'm sure there's not a perfect way to grow up, but
There's not a perfect way to be a parent, but what the research consistently tells us is that the most effective parenting strategies are the ones that are very attuned to the child. So good enough more often than not.
Yeah.
Right? You're showing up, catching what your kid needs, paying attention to what they need, thinking about how you speak to them, and creating scaffolding so that they can get their cute little gooey, unsophisticated brains to the next step of learning and knowing and doing and examining and being, right?
middle school.
Yeah.
The most traumatic time for anyone in their entire life.
It can be.
I feel like that's where people get made or broken is middle school. If you get crushed in middle school, most people don't recover.
I haven't, no.
Yeah.
But to your point, there are parenting styles that are far more permissive, and then there are parenting styles that are far more authoritarian.
Sure.
The research is pretty clear that at the extremes, neither is a great approach. So something in the middle that's more, the word is escaping me now, but just it blends discipline, boundaries, framework with positive regard, kindness, empathy, and attunement tend to be the kids who grow up to be the most well-adjusted.
Yeah.
So, that's obviously comparing different, points of like nurture and like maybe parenting, or just in general, as we're talking about growing up and having a childhood and how that, has basically every impact growing up. When we had on the dominatrix, and this is very specific, but I want to take it to like a broader point. Okay. She felt that some people, in her quote was, some people she felt are just born kinky or they're not. And that was her opinion. So on just a broader scale, do you think how much of it is really that nature versus nurture argument? Do you think some people are, basically born with certain traits? Or do you think a lot of it more is the environment as they're growing up and things like that? Or a little bit of combination of both?
Well, I would say that the answer to that is that pretty much everything that we do in life and the way that we experience life is epigenetic, meaning if we have a genetic potential for something, then how it might express is dependent on what we are exposed to in our environment. So it's not nature or nurture, it's nature via nurture.
Sure.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. So I don't know what that dominatrix was particularly referring to when she said people are born kinky, but what I make up is that there is a pretty diverse expectation for how people's brains can potentially grow and materialize, and some people do have different genetic underpinnings that might allow for more open-mindedness or might desire more pain in order to have similar sensation or arousal, but a lot of that gets shaped and expressed based on kind of a lot of different factors in terms of how they're socialized around sex and how they're socialized to feel in their own skin.
Yeah, and not to be like too with as you're growing up, do you obviously parenting has huge, I feel like, either sometimes you have a single mom or you have like two parents, and sometimes like the single mom, you'd much rather have a single mom than like two parents that are like just at odds every single day. Like,
sure.
It always differs on every single person. But do you think, like, and not to be too crude, but like, obviously the joke is like, oh, like she has daddy issues, or I'll say I have daddy issues. Do you really think that there are not necessarily daddy issues, but like just parent issues of where like maybe either a female or male too, they take that into their adult emotional life where they're looking for either like maybe an authoritative figure or someone that they want to feel safe with and things like that. Like, how does that entail when coming up? Like, how prevalent is that?
Ask me again about the term daddy issues in a second, but I'm going to answer your question.
Okay.
So whatever we experience in our earliest, most formative years, so like 0 to 36 months, is
really that early?
Is super, super important.
That's crazy.
In terms of how we learn to be in our own bodies and how we learn to feel safe with other people around us. So in those 36 months initially is where we basically develop the template for what will be our adult attachment style.
That's insane.
That is insane because you see, like, not to cut you off, but you see so many like different thought processes as to like what a 1-year-old is. Like so many people think they're just like little mashed potato babies that are cute and they don't do anything to them. And then but that's clearly not the case if within the first 3 years, like that's the full molding process. Like you need to be on your shit when they're like at the very earliest stage. Whereas I think a lot of people kind of like, it's whatever. He's just a baby.
Yeah,
There's nothing.
just kick it. Like,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
like,
just
it's like,
knock
no,
it
the
around.
baby's gonna remember it, and also now kick, like, you know.
1,000 more babies.
Yeah, like it's.
Yeah,
That's
let's
so
hope
weird,
People are not kicking their babies.
Yeah, we'll take the extremes.
But you know, to take maybe a less extreme example, when babies are young in that stage, they're pre-verbal, right, for the most part. I mean, they can string a few words together, but really until we develop our vocabulary, we don't know how to really consciously understand what we're experiencing with any kind of real sophistication, right?
Sure.
So basically, why those years are so critical is because we don't know what's happening because we don't have a vocabulary to understand it or to communicate our needs differently. So what ends up happening is our body just experiences pleasure, pain, calm, sort of those 3 states. And if our parents are not well attuned or our caregivers are not well attuned to what is going on and helping us alleviate that distress, even something simple like, well, have you ever held a baby?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Terrifying.
Yeah. I don't want that
I hate
liability.
holding babies. My hands are already sweating right now.
Okay, good to know. I won't bring any. All right.
I actually brought with me today.
Exhibit A.
So when you hold a baby, I don't know if you ever noticed, but you know they make eye contact for a little bit, right? And then they look away. Why?
They're downloading what they saw?
That could very well be. They might just need a break. It's intense to make
It's all
eye
input,
contact.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no output. There's no way to verbalize. It's all just constant one direction feed.
Yep. So even as adults, it's really hard for us to make eye contact for long
Sure.
periods of time. So, you know, if you imagine a little kid who doesn't know what's going on, and there's, you know, a parent who wants to make googly eyes with them because they're adorable. Would you call them little mashed potato babies?
Yeah.
That's actually cute. Yeah.
That's really cute.
Yeah.
And they are. They're little, you know, blobs of cuteness.
Yeah.
And they have to be, or we would not take care of them. So,
This is the dark psychology route that we didn't get to go down
Oh,
to
God.
today.
Talk about evolutionary
Yeah,
psychology.
we're lucky they're cute.
They are. Puppies too. But so, you know, we look at these babies and we want to connect with them because we love them and we, you know, spent a long time cooking them in our bodies and here
Sure.
they are and they're awesome. And so we make eye contact with them and some parents don't pick up the cue. So their baby will disengage. That's a way for their nervous system to kind of recalibrate, take a breath. All right, I can go back in and make more eye contact. So a parent who turns the baby to stay in the baby's eye contact and gaze. Now, people wouldn't necessarily point to this and say this is child abuse or it's terrible.
Sure.
They would probably say this is a parent who just wants to make googly eyes with their baby, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't come from a malice place either. It comes from love.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't come from a bad place at all. And so it feels, you know, for the baby like, I can't get away from this.
Yeah.
I can't relax. And they don't know what to think. They don't know how to think. They can't think. So they just feel. And it feels really scary. So, you know, a couple instances of misattunement here and there are not the end of the world. But if you have a parent who's chronically misattuned, that's where we develop different imprints that can lead us to picking partners who misattune to us later. So whatever exists in those early years, we are likely to unconsciously pick out in our partners later in life because that is the template with which our body and our brain has encoded caregiving, love, family.
And then you'll seek that out to match it, and
yes.
that's crazy.
So-
That's mind-blowing that the first 3 years is like
Yeah.
that impactful.
So my favorite question, obviously, we mentioned daddy issues. Thoughts?
Yeah. Well, so
What's all that about?
Is there validity?
yes, I mean, okay, here's what I wanted to say about it. I hate this term, daddy issues, and I hate the term mommy issues because it's really insidiously victim blaming,
Yeah.
right? And what we ought to be doing is saying, wow, this person didn't get their needs met by a parent. That parent really let them down, right? In whatever way, shape, or form, and not shaming them for it. So I'll get off my soapbox. That said, yes, we can all show up in relationships with unfinished business and unmet needs that we are hoping our partner will help us solve. Now, we do this unconsciously, and if we align with a good partner who is good for us, right? I'm not going to assess the quality of their personhood, but if they're good for us, right, and they are attuned to our needs, they're empathic, they don't judge us, they don't shame us, we can heal early childhood wounds together in a partnership. We can learn to have more security in our attachments. But until that happens, then we're likely going to be, operating in a fear-based position in relationships or being repeatedly disappointed and hurt.
All right. So, really, to wrap it up, I had a couple speed round questions.
Okay.
For you. So we'll fly through them here.
Yeah.
Number one, do you think, let's say, like sexuality, do you think it's on a spectrum? Like, do you think it's fluid? Or in short, do you think everyone's a little bit gay?
Well, okay, so you can't just throw speed round and then speed bump like that.
That's kind of what we do here. But do you think it's fluid? Is on a spectrum, maybe?
Yes, yes, the science definitely hands down demonstrates that sexuality is on a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say people can't be on one side of that continuum or the other with more certainty. So I'm not going to say are we all a little bit gay, because some people, I'm going to go home to a mob of angry people outside my house. But I would say that when we are a lot more open about who we are and our sexuality and what turns us on, even if we never choose to act on something, we might recognize that, oh yeah, I can appreciate that person who is the same gender as me is sexy and attractive, even if I don't want to be sexual with them. And so
makes total sense.
Yeah, so in that context, you might argue you're somewhere on that sexual spectrum, right, or that continuum. But there are people who are more aligned and experience arousal at either side of that continuum more robustly.
Yeah, well, even to go just a step further, I know certain individuals will say, like, we'll call him Keith. Or just so basically, let's say that person also, even further, they're more sexually attracted to maybe like a sexual organ or like maybe like a hookup with someone of the same sex, but they would never actually like date.
So that's a different kind of situation. We're talking about sexual arousal and romantic love.
There you go.
And people can be romantic with people of one gender and sexual with the other. Sometimes they can.
That's so trippy, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we are really complex beings.
Yeah.
And so some people have more fluidity and openness to the sexual and the romantic experience. And other people tend to be, again, on either sides of that continuum. There is no right or wrong, no good or bad.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, next one.
Okay.
Relationships. Top red flags.
Deception, gaslighting, any kind of dismissiveness. If your partner does not take you seriously, that is a giant red flag.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Women. They get a bad rap, or is it true? Why do women fake orgasms?
Oh, how much time do we have?
Speed round.
I don't know if I can do this justice in a speed round. All right, let me think about
That's fair.
There are many reasons. All right. In no
I wanted to go home.
order. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
I'm bored.
Sometimes they're bored. Sometimes they're in pain. Sometimes they realize that the quality of the sexual experience is not really what's important, but sometimes their partner is overemphasizing the importance of an orgasm to shore up their own ego. And so sometimes women will just be like, oh, okay, anything.
You did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Woohoo. That was a streamer.
Oh.
So sometimes there's that. Sometimes there is fear of what might happen in the relationship if they do not have an orgasm, right? They might be protecting their partner's feelings. Sometimes they can't have an orgasm. Either the two of them together don't know enough about how to properly stimulate her and don't communicate about it in an effective way. And so there's sort of a lack of proper stimulation or a lack of appropriate fantasy in her mind. There could be a history of sexual trauma or other kinds of trauma that make being in her body more challenging. So there could be some dissociation that disconnects her from the sexual sensation. Could be, I don't know, having 1,000 things to do that day and no one to help buy the groceries or put them away or write that paper she's got to write for work.
So she's saying is you're helpless. That's what she's
Are you secretly a woman who can't have an orgasm?
No, he's just the guy that's been trying for so long to get her to.
Last question. Now with the emergence of OnlyFans and everything like that, do you feel what was your thoughts on sex work, and do you think the stigma is kind of going away from that, like finally, or like just your initial thoughts on that?
Also, not speed round question appropriate because there's so much to say.
I know. I'm
you
sorry.
guys are awesome. Let me think about how to answer this concisely. I think that sex work I know sex work has been around since the dawn of human existence.
The earliest profession, yeah.
It is the oldest profession. So, again, everyone's relationship to it is unique. And so there are some people who go into it from a very empowered, transparent way, and it can be really beneficial for them, whether they are the person engaging in the sex work or consuming it. So there are also people who are brought into this industry through really unethical means. They've been sex trafficked, or it is unknown to them that their videos and images are being used commercially. So in those kinds of situations, it can be wildly detrimental for them. And also, I would say to the consumers too, although they may not experience it as detrimental in the moment. So I think, if I were queen of the universe, I would find a way to legitimize and legalize sex work so that it could be something that is destigmatized.
Oh, yeah.
It's our male guy. He's a jerk.
The male guy?
Yeah. He's a bit of an asshole.
I thought maybe we had a chorus about sex work outside. Somebody's throwing a party.
Right. Well, Dr. K, I'm going to take everything that we've learned today, and maybe one day I'll lose my virginity.
No.
And then find the right person that's right for me.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you for
No,
coming on. You were awesome. I
exactly.
feel like I could talk to you for like 17
Yeah,
hours.
So, Dr. K, we'll have all of your links below, but
Yeah.
where else can the people find you?
So the easiest way is probably modernintimacy.com.
Okay.
That's my website. There's tons of great articles and resources there. And then on Instagram at Dr. Kate Balestrieri or The Modern Intimacy.
Cool. Well,
Cool.
thank you so much
Thank
for
you
coming
again.
on. We had a great time.
Thank
Yeah.
you both. This
And
was awesome.
thank you so much. So stay tuned. We'll see you guys next time. All right. Peace.